You might see me as being responsible for the murder of 70,000 women, but really, because if you really thought I was responsible for the murder of 70,000 people, I don't think we'd be debating in this particular way. So I too believe that from the time an egg is fertilised, that a human life is there. I don't believe it's a life that has the same value of the life that knows that it's alive.
When first I saw Furedi, I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live through her masticide. Then I spent so many nights, my gestation to prolong, and I grew strong. I became 12 inches long, now I'm unique. 24 weeks, I should be safe from all your forceps coming after me. But you want to change the law, cause your thirst for even more would deny my basic worth, so you could kill me up to birth. But I'll survive, I will survive. If I can get ex utero, I'll have the right to life. I've got all my love to give, I got all my life to live. I will survive, I will survive. Hey.
What about your views on gender selection?
It should always be down to the woman to make the decision for herself.
Go and now go, walk out the door. Tell the nation, the disabled, we ain't welcome anymore. If our gender isn't right, we don't have no human rights. It's our mother's right to choose, and our humanity to lose. But I'll survive, I will survive. Oh, I've got to get ex utero, and I pray I'm born alive. Clinging on for my due date, please God, not Virginia State. I will survive, I will survive. Hey.
The point of an abortion is to terminate the pregnancy, to end the pregnancy without there being a live birth. So a live birth is not a good result. It really isn't for anybody who's concerned.
LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show. LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the LIVEcast. Good to have you back with us.
That's right.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah.
You've probably not been anywhere. We've been away.
We've been away? Yeah.
We've not been here. It's been us.
We have been to Southampton, where we've been on a mission called Human.
Human.
Yeah.
Because we're only human after all.
Yeah. He took the blame for me, as you might want to update a popular beat song.
Yes.
Yes, I saw even that Bethany Squires from Southampton University might even be watching. Are you watching, Bethany? Are you there? Say hello. Wearing my jumper. Thank you for the jumper. So we were just there for a week of outreach, and yeah, they threw the kitchen sink at it, and it was marvellous.
Yeah,
so,
it was a great time. It was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we had morning meetings and then lunchtime talks.
Yeah.
Where people took on very interesting issues like God and science and is there truth and meaning and
resurrection,
those
kind of things.
Yeah. Can you trust the Gospels and things like that?
Yep.
Bethany Squire says, "Nice jumper, Glen." Thank you, Bethany. It's the way I wear it. Yeah. As Will Smith says in which film is it where he says, "I make this look good." What's that? Men in Black. Men in Black. That's it. Yeah. I make this look good. So yeah, lunchtime talks, and then in the evening,
interviews and talk from yourself.
That's right.
And it was a good lineup of interviews, wasn't it? We had James Carey, who, if you have been following Speak Life for a while, you might have seen him on, not on here before, but on the Speak Life channel, around the time he did Divine Comedy.
That's right.
So you can still go and check out those interviews, actually.
Yes. And if you find
What's
Southampton,
so funny? They're called
yes?
like What's So Funny About Good Friday, aren't they? What's so funny about Easter Sunday and stuff like that? So you can check them out.
Yeah, and you can find that actual talk if you find the Southampton University Christian Union YouTube channel. There's actually recordings of the interview and the talk that I gave on What Is Life, a Comedy or Tragedy. So that was good, and we'll get into more of what that is later on in the show. But Paul, what were we thinking? We started off with a Gloria Gaynor number, Disco for the Unborn.
Yeah, I mean, I at some point during this morning, I turned to Glen and I just said, "What are we doing with our lives?" Like, I mean, for the last 24 hours, the only thing I've seen is that baby on that screen.
Yeah, trying to get my lips to match up with the lips of a fetus.
I feel I've slightly lost my mind.
Yeah.
My mom.
Have you been able to get "I Will Survive" out of your head?
No,
Quite the earworm.
Continually humming it wherever I go at the moment. So, what were we thinking? Yeah, I don't know. Well, what were you thinking, Glenn? I mean, I just get roped into these things. I just get dragged along.
Well, I was in the bathroom, and when I said the word Furedi, it sounded like afraid. And then I started singing it. When first I saw Furedi, I was petrified. And the rest wrote itself, really. Kept thinking I could never live through her mass feticide. Yeah. So I just, and then I said, make it happen.
Roll with this.
Make it happen, Paul.
Yep.
So I hope you like it.
Next year's Jerusalem Awards.
That's it.
Best use of lip synced.
Yeah. I feel it. A BAFTA is coming.
BAFTA
is coming. So, and the whole point was that we were picking up from the latest unbelievable debate where Ann Furedi, who is the chief executive of BPAS, the largest abortion provider in the UK, debated Sue Thayer, who used to work for Planned Parenthood, who's the largest abortion provider in the States, on have abortion rights gone too far. Sue Thayer, having worked for Planned Parenthood, is now pro-life, and Furedi emphatically is pro-abortion. And so they had a very civil conversation about it. And lots of people have sort of wondered, should it be so civil when they're talking about things so heated? But actually, I thought that a civil discussion actually uncovers more things than if it's all, accusations and hurling elephants at one another. And so what I thought we could do is just briefly go through, I think, the 5 things that Ann Furedi gets right, rather than majoring on the things that she gets wrong. But I think as soon as you grant the 5 things that she gets right, I think her position then kind of crumbles, basically. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you can go to YouTube and check out the debates. They both filmed it, and it is now on the podcast as well. But we've put the link in the Facebook comments, so you can check out the debate yourself. But I've used both clips from this debate and from some other things that Ann Furedi has done at points. But I just thought we could go through. Here are the 5 things I think Ann Furedi, an abortion rights activist, gets right. Number 1, abortion is used routinely as a backstop to contraception. Ann Furedi is very clear on this and thinks it is not a problem at all. So let's have a look at this first clip. Abortion is used routinely as a backstop to contraception.
Well, actually, I'm not going to use anything at the time of sex. I'll use the morning after pill, perhaps, because I don't really want to have an abortion, but if the morning after pill fails because it's not so effective, I'll have an abortion as a backup. I think, women do that. I think it's a completely reasonable thing for them to do.
So, women do that? Women do that, and it's a completely reasonable thing to do. So, often that's raised as just an objection to abortion, that it's just contraception after the fact. But she's like, yeah, totally.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I would say a lot of people who are pro-choice, I would say, I often hear them saying that's not what people do.
Right.
That people aren't using it as a form of contraception, that it's a kind of last resort kind of thing. But actually, she seems to be saying, actually, it's quite common.
Right.
People do have that mentality, and she goes, that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
which I disagree with. But
That's where her conversation begins. She's like, yeah, let's just acknowledge where we're at. It's a form of contraception.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to use contraception, that's fine. Use the morning after pill, and if that hasn't worked and you haven't thought about it, then use abortion. And, as we'll get on, she wants to abolish any restrictions on abortion post 24 weeks, which is the restriction that is in place in the UK. So here's one thing that Ann Furedi gets right. Abortion is used routinely as a backstop to contraception. The leading advocate for abortion rights in this country says that, just boldly. Okay, well,
there we go. She's honest, at least.
She's honest. Okay, there's number one. The number two thing that Ann Furedi gets right is that she says, and this is so key, the unborn child is human, is a life, and a human life from conception. Get this.
I too believe that from the time an egg is fertilized, that a human life is there. And, I think we all, well, not all of us, obviously, but I think we could both say that we have a presumption in favour of life. And that unique life is wonderful and is marvellous, whether you think it's God-given or not. Mm-hmm. But the point is, for me, is it's really about who makes a decision about how that life is valued, not in the abstract, but in relation to other things. There are things that we can agree on. For example, we can agree on the beginnings of life. The fundamental thing that we disagree on is when that life really begins to matter morally, and who should make the moral decision.
There it is.
Wowzers. See, that again is not what I would say I hear abortion, like pro-abortion advocates saying. Often they'll say it's not a life until some arbitrary point. Certainly wouldn't go as far as Anne does and say it's a human life. That'd be even worse saying that, because that really puts you in a bind. So again, fair play to Anne for that. The amazing thing is, at what point does that life become valuable?
Yeah.
At which point I think I'd want to say to Anne, is your life valuable yet?
Yeah.
Right. Or any of our lives. But on what basis are you going to do that?
Yeah. Because in wanting to lift the limit from 24 weeks, she makes an argument in this debate that it is so arbitrary and silly to say that 23 weeks and 6 days you can kill a human life.
Yep.
And at 24 weeks plus 1 day, you cannot kill a human life.
She says, 5 to midnight,
right?
Wrong, 5 past.
Yeah.
That's fine.
How arbitrary.
How arbitrary.
Yeah. And then Justin asks the excellent question, well then, isn't it arbitrary for you? Because you're saying, 5 minutes before birth,
fine.
Fine. And 5 minutes after birth, not fine.
Not so much.
Not so much.
Absolutely.
Isn't that arbitrary? And she really struggles with that question.
Well, she just doesn't really answer the question. She kind of talks around it.
No. She does say, as we'll get onto. Well, we'll get onto what she does say at that point. But the unborn child is life and is a human life from conception. And I guess
and she says about how and she talks about it even if you're not religious, this beautiful, amazing thing.
Yes, wonder, and it has some value, and that value grows over the course of the gestation. And in a sense, she has to say that from conception there is life and human life from a scientific point of view.
Yeah.
So she's forced to say that scientifically, but then makes a total hash of the philosophy, the theology of what life therefore means. But Ann Furedi says abortion is used routinely as a backstop to contraception. Secondly, the unborn child is human from conception. Maybe she should follow through on these thoughts a little further. But she at least gets that right. Thirdly, Ann Furedi admits that abortion is horrible. Let's have a look.
And my experience was a very different one. It is horrible. There is no doubt about it. As you say, you look at the remains following a late-term abortion, and it is grim. But it's completely put into a different light by the conversations that you've had about why the women who've requested that abortion are going through that procedure. And
it's horrible and it's grim. But what she wants to do, she wants to take abortion out of the law and just make it a medical issue. But she's admitting that it's more than a medical issue by saying that it's horrible to that degree, because you wouldn't say, you know, having your wisdom teeth out.
It's a little bit icky, like if you saw an operation,
right?
And you know, some people might go, "Oh, I'm not
good
good with
blood."
Yeah. She's saying more than that, isn't she?
I think so.
Well, she says there about the body parts. She uses the word, doesn't she? Body
Right.
parts. I think she says that.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, just before that clip, she said, you know, I've been in a 3rd trimester abortion, and then she stops herself and she says, oh, no, because BPAS don't do 3rd trimester abortions, but I've been to a late-term abortion, and blah, and off she went. Interesting slip of the tongue. I just put that out there. Interesting slip of the tongue. But, yeah, it is horrible. It is grim. It starts to sound like morally horrible, right?
And fascinating that her justification is the conversations. Presumably, she's saying, you know, these people are saying, if I have this baby, then this is what it will mean for me. And you just think, well, yeah, but you can just use that at any stage in life,
right?
For anybody,
right? You
know, actually, looking after grandma's really expensive in the care home.
Yeah.
So it'd be better if we just got rid of her now. These newborns are pretty hard work.
Right.
You know, completely mucked up my life. I can't go back to work.
Yeah.
Just where do you draw? I mean, she talked about arbitrary. You know, know,
right.
There's arbitrary right there. You know.
Yeah, and she'll say that sentience is what grants the human child rights. But you know, from one perspective, the human brain isn't properly formed until age 25.
Yep.
You know, and certainly the born child who's 5 minutes old doesn't have any more sentience than the unborn child.
No.
And that gets onto the 4th thing that Ann Furedi gets right. The 4th thing that Ann Furedi gets right is she admits that the difference between the unborn and the born is only one of geography. For the fetus involved, for the unborn child involved, the only difference between being on this side of the birth canal and that side of the birth canal is merely geography.
What's the difference between the baby being in the womb and the sort of the journey out of the birth canal and then being out of the womb, when suddenly that child acquires a whole set of rights that it doesn't have inside the womb?
I think it's a really difficult question, and it's something that I'm really struggling with myself, actually, to think about how to explain this. I mean, it's simply a matter of geography, and that doesn't matter to the fetus.
Wowzers.
Yeah, there it is.
Literally just position.
Yeah,
where you are
just
geographically.
Yeah, it's like saying it's illegal to stab me in the living room, but in the kitchen, all bets are off. You know, literally one of geography. And she says, like, to the fetus, it doesn't matter. But her argument is that once the child is outside the womb, then a whole bunch of other people can come in and care for the child, which was not true. You know, while the child was inside the womb, the woman was the sole, you know, had sole responsibility for this child and had to keep it alive. Once the child is out, well, social services can come in and adopt the child out. And
surely you can just apply. I mean, you could apply that from any point at which a child could be viable.
Right.
You know, so so if you look at the New York laws that have come in, you'd have to say, well, that's nonsense because, you know, was it 21 weeks and 6 days was what John Wyatt said was the youngest child they'd ever had survive.
Yeah.
So you'd have to say, wouldn't you? Well, we just take the baby out and care for it rather than kill babies, you know.
But she resisted that, and in the debate she said that in the UK we've always had this tradition of strong bodily autonomy, such that even if you could do an emergency C-section on a mother and deliver the child alive, and they would have a much better chance of survival. If the mother does not want that, then that trumps everything because bodily autonomy, right? And so she says the only difference is geography, and we can't even change the geography if it'll save the life.
And that just comes back around to your rights as, you know, it's not simply there are two bodies involved rather than just one.
Right.
Why does the woman's right trump
a
baby's rights?
Right. Yeah. We don't know. Nathan Veal has just commented. Nathan Veal from Warwick University, which we're going to have a look at later on. He's just said the magical powers of the birth canal.
Oh, yeah, we all know that one.
That's fantastic video. Do you think while we're playing a longer video, we might be able to find the magical powers of the birth canal?
Yeah, maybe.
Might be able
I'll
to
see
play
what I
that
can
later.
do.
Tremendous. The magical powers of the birth canal is, in terms of comedy abortion videos, there's that one and there's ours. The unborn abortion disco.
Different markets, you know. You're
Different,
aiming for
yeah.
different markets with different videos, you
It
know,
is a little
different demographic.
What's the fifth thing that Ann Furedi gets right? The fifth thing is that the humane response to a child who is born alive is to care for that child. So let's say that there was a botched abortion and the child is born alive. Now, Ann Furedi says that is a terrible state of affairs. That's the last thing that anybody wants. Except the child. Except maybe the baby. Right? The last thing that anybody wants is life. Ooh. How inconvenient, right? But she does say, thankfully, she does say that the humane response once the child is born alive is to care for the child. Let's have a look at this.
Should it happen, actually, what we're legally obliged to do, and you might also say what morally the right thing to do, is to treat, say, I don't know, for some reason the gestation has been wildly misassessed. Then of course what you would be doing is treating that baby in a way that is humane, and if it is sufficiently advanced and could be resuscitated and could have a life, that is of course what you would do.
Even if you had only moments before been trying to kill the baby?
Well, I'm thinking, we're talking hypotheticals here, so I'm putting myself in a hypothetical situation of, say, for example, I don't know, something had gone terribly wrong with a scanning process and terribly wrong with the diagnostics, and a woman was having a medical abortion, the fetal heart hadn't been stopped, and she delivered a fetus that turned out to be 32 weeks pregnant. And actually you didn't think it was. Of course you're going to do everything that you can to keep that baby alive. The nurses, the staff are not monsters.
Right.
You know, of course you would be trying to do that because you would be in a different situation.
Even if you had only moments before been trying to kill the baby?
Sorry, that was a bit naughty. Tacking on Justin's earlier question. Repeating that point.
It just, the whole thing boggles my mind. Like, of course, you know, she says, of course you would care for the baby. And she talks about, 32 weeks. But I was just thinking, well, what do you do then? What happens to that baby? Because you can't give it to mum.
Right.
Unless you want to strip away that autonomy there.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, are you... And did...
I'll take it.
You know, yeah.
I'll take him.
I'll have it.
Yeah.
Mum doesn't want a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's going on here?
What's going
come
on?
on, just
Yeah. They're not monsters. They're not monsters. I just thought Justin's question was
would
just
care for
brilliant. Yeah, of course we care for it, even though 5 minutes earlier you'd been trying to kill the baby. Of course we'd care for the baby. We're not monsters, even though by her own admission the only thing that's changed is geography.
yeah.
We're not monsters. We would stab them in the living room, but we would never stab them in the kitchen.
And the worst thing you'd want is a live birth.
I know.
That's what she says.
That's the
isn't it?
last thing anyone wants. Yeah. Which is why, that's why I thought I'd have a singing baby in the womb, right? Because, for goodness sakes, we need to give a voice to the voiceless. And someone needs to stand up and say, actually, here I am.
That was actual footage from inside the womb. Yeah.
I had quite a deep voice as a child. My voice broke very early. So these are the 5 things Ann Furedi gets right. Abortion is used routinely as a backstop to contraception. Correct. The unborn child is human from conception. Correct. Abortion is horrible. Correct. The difference between the unborn and the born is only geography. Correct. And the humane response to a child born alive is to care for the child. Correct. Add those things up, and you should not be able to hold the pro-abortion position.
That's why I found that whole debate so fascinating, because she, like I say, I just don't think I've really come across people arguing for pro-choice who would admit those things, or would believe those things often, or I mean, they'd probably go for number 5, that it is humane to care for a child born alive. But I think most people would not want to admit those things. And I just find it so bizarre that you could admit those things.
Yeah.
And then, well, how can you in any way be consistently hold those views and then go and do that by any logic? Like, and then go, we're not monsters.
We're not monsters. And how dare you ever call us murderers? Right.
And she's deeply offended, isn't she, by the
comparison
to Nazi Germany and killing people in that way.
Or calling it murder. You know?
Yeah.
Like, she's genuinely saying this is deliberately ending an innocent human life.
Yep.
Anyone want to Google murder? Just go to Wikipedia right now and look up the definition of murder. I think you'll find that it's deliberately ending an innocent human life, which is precisely what she wants to do. So those are 5 things. Here are 5 things she gets right. And I think if I was to identify the one most horrible thing that she gets wrong, is that she grants that they are human and she denies that they have rights. So she basically has a model of humanity that's on a dimmer switch. It's not an on or off switch. Scientifically, you are on from the moment of conception. But morally, you only accrue rights over your development in terms of being a dimmer switch. And for her, it seems like self-consciousness is the thing that turns up the brightness on your humanity to the point where you can be protected. Which has all sorts of problems, you know, as you say, for the elderly, for the disabled, for the young child. You know, as Ben Shapiro, you know, once asked a guy who said, you know, sentience is what gives me value. He says, so can I stab you if you're in a coma?
I'd rather you didn't. Like, but it doesn't just apply, though, does it? To and this is why I understand why people are so offended by the comparison to Nazi Germany, because no one wants to really be. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a shock if you suddenly discover you hold a view that is, you know,
are we the baddies?
Yeah, like that, isn't it? But it doesn't just apply to the idea of killing, does it? You know, I mean, you could take this idea of this dimmer switch humanity, and you can see just how in the past it's like, well, you know, you're black, so you can't sit on this area of the bus. Or
you're human. You're human.
Yeah, but you're not quite as human as these people. Yeah, not up to that level.
You don't want humanity in the abstract. We need to weigh your value against all sorts of competing claims.
And we already saw in there. I mean, it seems a bit shocking to us, but of course, she's already talking on her. It was on Loose Women, wasn't it, on the other clip, about the mum should choose the gender. So, you know, if you get a girl, you don't want a girl, fine. I mean, and of course that has been going on for years and years and years, particularly kind of in China. And again, it's that kind of, well, who's more valuable? Right. You know, there's humans, but... Yeah. You know,
there's humans and there's humans.
And at what point... Yeah. You know, and there's just no way you can say... There's no way you can say, I can do that in the womb, but it's not okay outside the womb. Yeah. You're either saying it's all fine or it's all wrong. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's got to be an on or an off switch. It can't be the dimmer switch. And I think human rights is built on that. You know, so, you know, the Declaration of Independence. So Thomas Jefferson said, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. And, surely inalienable. Come on, Thomas Jefferson. But you know, it was written in as unalienable, and no one thought to spell check it. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the unalienable, the inalienable aspect of it, that it is inherent, it is not granted by anybody else. That person is valuable in and of themselves, not because the strong or powerful say that they're valuable, just because they're human. Yep. Same as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the inherent dignity. It speaks of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable. So the UN gets it right, Thomas Jefferson not so much. The inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. It's got to be an on or an off switch. And if you grant that they are human, you can't say they're human, but they're the killable kind. That's not an option. Sorry, Anne, not an option. And that's what makes her position so horrific, because it not only leads to the killing of the unborn, it leads to the devaluing of all life, and putting all human beings on a scale, and you've got to weigh people up, and it's the strong who determine whether the weak are valuable or not. I wonder. I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, where's this going to go longer term? And I mean, there is some argument that as science progresses, we'll get even further into the kind of life beginning. You know, the science will reveal even more about the child younger and younger and younger in the development stages. And there is there's a hope that years from now people will look back on abortion and they'll be as horrified by people's attitudes to abortion as we are to slavery or apartheid or segregation, all those things.
I think so.
And I think that's possible.
Yeah.
And I hope I think
we'll move on to some other kind of genocidal ideology.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is that it's when it gets to the other end of the spectrum, because I think that is coming, as these things always do, because there is no doubt about, grandma and granddad being alive, but that becomes, it's not going to be a question of science there.
Well, brain death has changed its definition something like 20 times in the last 50 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, brain dead was never a thing until we realized that we need to harvest organs from people in order to redistribute them to the living. But they discovered that as soon as the heartbeat stops, actually all the organs apart from corneas are worthless once the heartbeat stops. So you actually have to carve up a living human body in order to redistribute the organs.
Wow.
And so that's where they came out with brain death, right? The sentience had not quite reached the right limit. And then we've relaxed that definition of brain death 20 times in the last 50 years. That's interesting.
Wowza.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think a culture of life, is not just about the unborn. It's about all these kinds of issues. And it has ramifications for all kinds of things. But anyway, do check out the Unbelievable podcast. I'm sure you're all subscribing to the Unbelievable podcast. It had James Carey on it the week before, as well as lots of other great stuff. So do check them out, and I've put a link to the video in the comments, and I'm sure we will return to this topic another time. But shall we move on to some happier news? As we've said at the start of the program, we were off on university missions. I was up in Warwick 2 weeks ago, and then we were at Southampton.
Just about.
Got there. I made it just in time for my talk. So I thought one great way of introducing you to what a week in the life of a university mission might look like would be to show you a clip that Warwick University Christian Union made about our week that was called Uncover, and that'll give you a little sense of what we get up to in a week of mission.
Hi, come on in. Let's look at what's inside the Uncovered.
When night has fallen, when fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up, 'cause you won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go now. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echoing my soul.
Very good.
There we go.
So you can check that out on the Warwick University Christian Union.
Look like being at New Wine.
I know.
Just like a couple of big
tent.
marquees and sitting around with your coffee table and whatnot. Like,
It was fantastic.
yeah.
So, I mean, because you're in it from morning till night, and it is its own best advertising, and people are like, oh, what's going on? Why are all the people, and so a crowd.
Why is this
draws a crowd.
marquee sprung up in the middle of the campus or whatever?
Why are you tabernacling among us? Well,
Come into the Holy of Holies.
yeah, that's right. No one's allowed in there. Only me. So that was, so, we would have, prayer meetings in the morning, and then we'd hit the campus and do some first contact evangelism, and then lunch times, and Tom Price gave some talks, and John Dawson gave a great Science and God talk, and then Christy Mayer gave some brilliant talks. In fact, maybe we'll put in the show notes a suffering talk that she gave, which was just absolutely phenomenal. And like 6 people said they wanted to become Christians at the end of her lunchtime talk. Just amazing. And in the evenings, I was just getting up and shooting my mouth off, and then there was some good musical items at the end. And they also had the Mark drama, which is, have you ever seen the Mark drama?
I've not seen it, no.
It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So you just get a bunch of people, maybe 12, maybe like a dozen people, to basically learn Mark's gospel, and you think, how can anyone do that? But people just from 0 to 60, they just learn these lines.
And they recite the whole gospel.
Yeah, I mean, not verbatim,
Okay.
but they just sort of have the gist, and they just get in their heads, and it really makes you think that Jesus taught memorably. So you get to Mark 4, and how do I remember Mark 4? Oh, it's the parable of the sowers. Oh, okay, there's 4 soil types, aren't there? And, so a sower went out to scatter seed in his field. And
Yep. Is that what, on that video with the people on the floor?
yeah, the people doing that were doing part of the Mark drama. They did that twice, and people were really moved by it, because the actors move among the crowd. And of course, if you're an actor in the Mark drama, you kind of say to all your flatmates, hey, come along and watch me, and they all did. Bill Lavelle saying, the Mark drama? Oh, yes, the Mark drama.
That should just be part of the advertising.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And if you want to get in touch about putting on a Mark drama near you, I can put you in touch with the right people. It's very, very moving, actually. The death scene, so Jesus dying on the cross, is, I want to say, stretched out. It's not stretched out. It's actually compacted to about 4 minutes, 5 minutes of, Jesus kind of trying to breathe and groaning in pain. And it's really uncomfortable. And then you remember, a third of Mark's gospel is about his death. And as uncomfortable as it is to sit through 5 minutes of the Son of God kind of going through that, you think, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Probably was relatively uncomfortable. Yeah. Just throwing that out there.
There's 5 things that Ann Furedi said that was true, and that was one thing that Paul said that was also true.
Those are the kind of little nuggets of wisdom I like to bring,
It's quite uncomfortable. God-forsaken agony and all that. But yeah, it really brings it home to you when they act it out in front of you. So that was great. And we saw loads of people who said they wanted to become Christians, and lots of people being followed up. And Nathan Veal, if you want to comment, you can let us know how things have been going in the follow-up. But the week after, we went to Southampton University. And how did you find that week? You didn't come to Warwick, but you were with me in Southampton.
Yeah, it was great. I had a good time down in Southampton. Mm-hmm. Really nice. I thought the CU did a really good job. They were kind of really well organised, and I don't know if they're the biggest CU in the country. They're one of the biggest, aren't they? There's
quite large.
Quite a good crowd of them.
Yeah.
So it seemed like there were loads of people kind of doing stuff. Lots of obviously they were running lots of events. Don't know how many there were altogether, but definitely kind of lunch and evening. And yeah, just lots of people getting involved. Seemed to be particularly at the lunch bars. Lots of people coming along. Particularly from day 2. Day 1 was a little bit quieter.
Always builds.
Yeah. But then other days it was standing room only.
Yeah.
And, people come for whatever reason. There's a sandwich.
The sandwich.
Like, it's a free sandwich. Brilliant. Or, people who've got a genuine interest. But it's just a really good opportunity, isn't it? To, you get to sit down with people and have a chat with them and whatnot.
Yeah.
And obviously you're flyering, similar to Warwick. In the mornings they had a big board in the middle of the kind of courtyard area with kind of different questions on each day to kind of engage people in conversation and get flyers in their hands and stuff like that. So, it was really good.
And there were people coming to Christ both in Warwick and in Southampton. There was, I just got a message yesterday that somebody was sitting on a table with a girl who'd been brought to the final evening, and I was interviewing an astrophysicist called
Southampton,
Christine.
Yep.
Yeah, at Southampton. Oh, sorry, at Southampton. So I was interviewing an astrophysicist, Christine Doan.
Yep.
And she knows all about black holes.
Black holes, that was
Yeah.
the thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And rockets.
And yeah, rocket and like launching off and pointing your X-ray telescope wherever you liked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rocket science and brain surgery. And
Yeah. That's right. She was a rocket scientist. And straight after the interview, we just had a little cake break before I was about to speak, and one of the girls turned to her host and said, "This is great. So how do I become a Christian?" And then, like, I spoke and said, "How you become a Christian?" And she was like, "Okay, good. I'll do that then." And
Sign me up.
Sign me up. And Nathan Veal from Warwick has just said, a bunch of people coming to church for the first time this coming week. Some new Christians who are really close. Some new Christians, some who are really close. Good number of people who are really close.
Great.
That's really great. So please pray. Pray for those from Durham. I say Durham because this week there is a mission happening up in Durham as well. The Story mission. I did Story a couple of years ago. And yeah, do be praying for university missions. There'll be like 100 different CUs around the country doing something in terms of reaching their campuses. And it's such a fertile time for evangelism. Not only are people at a stage of life where they're asking questions, not only are they being encouraged to ask the big questions through their studies, but also they're living cheek by jowl with other Christians, and they just can't escape. You know, if you've got two Christian housemates, you know, you're going to hear about, you know, Jesus quite consistently, and so yeah, you see lots of new life springing up because of these university missions. So yeah, do be praying for those. I thought the third and final thing we could talk about in the livecast is the issue of truth, not tribalism. That's what we've entitled this livecast, Truth, Not Tribalism. And what made me think of that is that in the last week or so, there have been 3 news items that have really highlighted horrors within the church, church scandals that really we ought to not distract from or deflect from, but to own and to face and to repent of. Probably 2 weeks ago now, the Houston Chronicle. We've got some viewers from Texas at the moment. You can chip in if you like, but the Houston Chronicle broke a story about the Southern Baptist Convention, which has nearly 50,000 churches. It's one of the largest denominations on earth. Right. Actually, it's something like the Catholics, there's the Anglicans, and there's the Southern Baptists, something like that. Over the last 20 years, there have been 700 victims of sexual abuse, 250 perpetrators who have worked or volunteered in Southern Baptist churches and have been charged with sex crimes. And so, like, huge story and huge shame and heartbreaking to read. So the Houston Chronicle article is very, very long, and just reading, because it wants to, like, take you through not just stats and figures, but actually there was this woman who had this experience, and there was this young girl who had that experience, and it's heartbreaking to read through it. How do we respond when these horrible scandals come to light? And then in the last week, James MacDonald, who's the founding pastor of Harvest Bible Chapel, a Chicago area megachurch, he was fired after saying some pretty shocking things about the staff of Christianity Today and other people, and the board said that it was this plus some allegations of bullying that he was already under consideration under investigation for, and so he was fired, and we are led to believe that others on staff at Harvest Bible Chapel will also be fired for a culture of bullying and anger and some nastiness happening behind the scenes. And then the third thing that's happened, and again, these are all sort of clustered together, certainly in my Facebook newsfeed, but Al Mohler just the other day, I think a couple of days ago, apologized for supporting C.J. Mahaney of Sovereign Grace churches. And that was when there were a whole bunch of allegations leveled at Sovereign Grace for both sexual and domestic abuse cover-ups. And Al Mohler had publicly supported C.J. Mahaney, and he now regrets having done that. He sort of sees that we are too eager to circle the wagons and to stand up for our friends when actually maybe our friends have done some pretty horrific things. But that whole mentality is what allows abuse to flourish. So how do we break out of this idea of truth, not tribalism? Well, so Rachel Den Hollander, we've spoken about her before. She was somebody who testified against the Team USA gymnastics coach Larry Nassar. Nassar, yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful Christian woman who kind of spoke publicly about the evil of abusing children, and held out forgiveness to her abuser, and has been blistering in her rebuke of churches when they have, covered up abuse. And I just thought she tweeted this out when the Southern Baptist abuse scandal broke. She said, "The worst part is that we have known for years. I have known most of this for years and spoken out about it. Nobody wanted to listen. It did not matter enough to investigate and act. Grief and repentance and silence to learn is the only proper response. Grief and repentance and silence to learn is the only proper response." And I just thought that's so different from the natural human response, which is to double down and say, well, don't trust the sources. It was the Houston Chronicle. It's the world. And so how easy would it be just to say, it's fake news, it's biased, or to deflect and to say, well, what about other perpetrators? There are other churches that are just as bad, or there's Team USA, gymnastics, or there's the BBC, or there's, what about? We deflect and we distract and we diminish and we self-justify. And Rachel Den Hollander says, no, grief and repentance and silence to learn is the only proper response. And it just got me thinking about these two paradigms that I've been thinking about recently, which is, are we on a war footing or are we on an exile footing? And I think a lot of people, because they're on Twitter and, there's left versus right and there's Brexit versus Remain, we are on a war footing. And therefore the other side is always wrong and we are always right. And even when it's shown that our side is wrong, it must be fake news or all these kinds of things. And we double down on our own position and we never learn and we never grieve and we never put up our hands and say, we were wrong. Whereas I think we're not on a warfare footing. We are on an exile footing. That actually the church and the world are not the same at all. And Babylon is really, really bad, right? Babylon is really, really bad. And the people of God are really precious to God. But there come times when God uses Babylon to judge his people. Or he uses Assyria to judge his people. I was just reading in Isaiah chapter 36 recently. Sennacherib says to all the Israelites as he's besieging them, they were like, no, go away, we've got the Lord. And Sennacherib was like, the Lord told me to come and do this. Like, your God has brought me to bring judgment on you. And Sennacherib, the enemy of God's people, is right, and God's people are wrong. And I've been reading through Jeremiah recently, and it just seems like constantly God is like, okay, you're going to go into exile, settle down in Babylon, pray for the prosperity of the city, and don't listen to all those prophets who just want to say, no, we're not going to fall. No, Babylon is never going to breach our walls. And they just double down and they just, rely on tribalism. And the Lord is constantly saying, no, Babylon will get its own just desserts in the end. But it is bringing a judgment against you. And I just think at times the church needs to look at the world and say, you are more righteous than we are, and you are bringing a judgment against us that is totally deserved, and all we can do is hold up our hands and say, we have been in the wrong. So when it comes to like abuse scandals, the warfare mentality says, wow, other people are just as bad. The exile mentality says, this is God's judgment and we grieve and we own the evil that we have done. And we have hope that God will bring restitution and justice and judgment in the end of all things. But the exile mentality means that the world can bring critique against us and we don't always have to deflect it. And with the bullying thing, so with the James MacDonald issue, I've known that Christians have come into church meetings that we've had. And this hasn't happened at my particular church, but I know lots of churches where this has happened, where people have for the first time being co-opted onto PCC or something, or some church council meeting.
Yep.
And they've been absolutely appalled by the way that Christians sort of speak to one another, because they're used to a professional environment where people, are actually civil with one another. And they come into a church environment, and they're like, oh my goodness, like, you would get fired,
Yeah.
If you worked for PCC, if you worked for, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you spoke to people the way you speak to Christians, like, you'd be fired, And I think sometimes the world needs to come in and give us a good slapping. And it can be right for the world to come in and give us a slapping, and we need to put our hands up and say, yeah, we are in the wrong, and Babylon is in the right in this instance. So Bill Lovell has said, Al-Mola shows himself to be a man of integrity, but how sad to read about Mahaney and the rush to protect him at the expense of victims. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's what I mean by truth over tribalism. When my tribe is accused of something, everything in me wants to rush to defend myself, my tribe, my mate. Actually, what we need to do is to honor the truth, because that's the other thing about what the Lord says to Israel while they're in exile in Babylon is, okay, 70 years. It's just 70 years. And then the Lord will bring about restitution, and he will restore your fortunes. And I think that gives you the hope to actually love Babylon, not to be like Babylon, but to love Babylon and to acknowledge whatever's wrong about yourself, because in 70 years the Lord's going to restore your fortunes, and that's going to be okay. And if we take our eyes off that perspective as well, then the here and now becomes everything. And so I just need to fight my own corner and just fortify my own position. So these are some thoughts that I'm having at the moment about these scandals, and these scandals are to our shame, and we need to do what Rachel Den Hollander says: grief and repentance and silence to learn. Because as Jesus says, it would be better for a millstone to be tied around your neck than for anyone to harm the little children. And our determination to protect the children does not end when they are born. Our determination to protect all life means that we protect all the vulnerable, whether they're in the womb or out of the womb, and therefore, whether it's an Ann Furedi who wants to end the life of the unborn, or whether it's a Christian leader who has been harming the little ones, we need to stand against those evildoers. We need to grieve and repent and have the silence to learn. Here endeth the lesson. So yes, lots more comments. Lots more comments going on in the comments of Facebook, and we'd love to get to those as we continue discussing things this afternoon. I'm just putting a link to the Rachel Den Hollander tweet in the comments, but I think that'll do us for now. But for those who did not come in at the very beginning of the livecast, we have a very exciting new video for you, and here is it's not a premiere anymore, but
no,
it's the second ever showing of I Will Survive, the Unborn Disco, featuring Ann Furedi.
And that's it. Then we're gone, are we?
I think so. So do be sharing us and all that.
And whatever. It's just we're gonna go sidle off. Like
speaklife.org.uk/give if you want to give towards this livecast, and
Foundry.
The Foundry. Oh yeah. Who wants to join us? Me. Of course you do. We're going to start up an internship September. Come down to Eastbourne, Sunshine Coast. We'll study together. We'll go on mission together. You can come to Warwick and Southampton and wherever else we're going. And we'll produce resources like the one you're about to see. So
and you can spend hours looking at a baby on a screen trying to animate its mouth.
Yeah. And I'll just put a link to the speaklifefoundry.com in the comments, and we'd love to hear from you. Applications are open. We've had some great people applying. We want to have 5 or 6 come and join us. So could you be one of those, or do you know somebody who'd like to join us?
Sweet.
Cool. Well, that'll do it.
This is like the worst sign-off ever. I'm like, are we actually going to say bye? Oh, we better say that. And then it's like, here we go. Are we going? Are you sure we're going? Like, we are going to go. Here's the video. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
You might see me as being responsible for the murder of 70,000 women, but really, because if you really thought I was responsible for the murder of 70,000 people, I don't think we'd be debating in this particular way. So I too believe that from the time an egg is fertilised, that a human life is there. I don't believe it's a life that has the same value of the life that knows that it's alive.
When first I saw Furedi, I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live through her masveticide. Then I spent so many nights, my gestation to prolong, and I grew strong. I became 12 inches long, now I'm unique. 24 weeks, I should be safe from my forceps coming after me. But you want to change the law, cause your thirst for even more would deny my basic worth, so you could kill me up to birth. But I'll survive, I will survive. If I can get ex utero, I'll have the right to life. I've got all my love to give, I got all my life to live. I will survive, I will survive. Hey.
What about your views on gender selection?
It should always be down to the woman to make the decision for herself.
Go and now go, walk out the door. Tell the nation, the disabled, we ain't welcome anymore. If our gender isn't right, we don't have no human rights. It's our mother's right to choose, and our humanity to lose. But I'll survive, I will survive. Oh, I've got to get ex utero, and I pray I'm born alive. Clinging on for my due date, please God, not Virginia State. I will survive, I will survive. Hey.
The point of an abortion is to terminate the pregnancy, to end the pregnancy without there being a live birth. So a live birth is not a good result. It really isn't for anybody who's concerned.